Bayede Jonas, Mr. Somabhiznisi, he who closes deals with ease, making millions like it's pocket change. Wena Casanova, whose love recognizes no borders. He swears, so fast lahlane by sunrise, and he's onto another by sunset. Intombi ziyayisela, king of Jonasibek.
While some men are praised, others should come with a warning. Watch The Polygamist, now playing only on Netflix.
Click kaya959.co.za.
This is how we do it.
To download the Point of View podcast.
Over to the Middle East now. So the first round of negotiations between US and Iran have reached a final to reach a final deal. Qatari and Pakistani negotiators are calling it an encouraging progressive meeting. I do have on the line defense and strategy analyst Dr. Joan Swart on the line with us this evening. Dr. Swart, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. And I just wanted to say I'm really following a difficult person to fill shoes with. I just heard the back end of your earlier conversation.
Well, I appreciate you making time for us. I mean, this had a stop-start kind of momentum, right? Because they walk into a meeting where already Donald Trump had offended them over X, and there was a slight protest by walking out. But eventually, you know, they everybody came back to their senses and sat. What do you think was actually achieved in this meeting?
Well, I think it's an extremely good and necessary start. I mean, you mentioned that it's still on shaky grounds, but I think we must remember that the most important point is that both sides have now stepped back from the conflict that's almost lasted for 4 months now, that neither could confidently win at an acceptable cost to either of them. So we need to understand that the agreement does not mean that they suddenly trust one another. But they've just both concluded that continuing the escalation is very much more costly for them than to negotiate.
Dr. Swart, I mean, this is the kind of war that changes literally every minute, every second. So over the weekend, the Strait of Hormuz was opened and closed again. And then Trump said a couple of tweets and, you know, really saying some offensive things about dropping bombs on their heads.
Yeah.
So what's going to hold this together? And we'll come to Israel now, but just in the manner in which as number one, you said mistrust, but also how they're going to manage this very volatile mouth of Trump's, number one.
That you've just got to ignore, and I think Iran has been doing very well up to now to just ignore it, because he makes a 180 just about minutes after he said something. He will sit back. But what is going to hold it, and you said we'll talk about Israel, that is the most contentious point on the MOU. So what is going to hold it is that both sides are they need this off-ramp. I mean, Trump is in trouble at home. He's facing growing economic and political costs. He cannot guarantee that escalation would remain limited. I mean, he's losing allies among the Gulf states one after the other. And he's risk being the reason for a big disruption to global energy markets. Now, on Iran's side, they are actually in a much stronger position than many expected. They have suffered military and economic damage. They are still facing pressure at home, though I think it's even now a little bit less than what it was before the war started, strangely enough. And they demonstrated that they've got leverage, that they can survive and not simply be coerced into surrendering.
So the very first point on that MOU is the issue of Lebanon.
Yes.
And this is a big one, because we're coming back to Israel. Israel is not in the room, during these negotiations currently. And I suspect that's going to be the biggest factor. What's your take?
I think so too. In the MOU, amongst the 14 points, the first point, I think, mentions Lebanon 3 times. And then there's one later on which talks about respect the sovereignty of Iran and Lebanon. And Iran's been very, very clear on this point. It's a non-negotiable. The conflict, the military action in Lebanon must stop. Now, of course, that's Israel that's committing that. That's been, entering or basically occupying a third of the southern part of Lebanon.
Yeah.
So a ceasefire between Washington and Tehran is necessary, without managing Israel somehow, it may not be sufficient to ensure lasting stability.
So how are we supposed to read this? Because I think it was on Friday where you kind of saw Donald Trump wagging the finger at Israel, saying, you better remember who's paying for those bombs, and without us, you wouldn't be where you are, or you wouldn't be safe. And there was a flip-flopping very quickly after that, because Israel reiterated Netanyahu over the weekend was steadfast in saying, well, I'm not backing down. In fact, we are not moving from the south of Lebanon. And then, of course, again, Trump then says, well, Iran must manage their proxies. So I'm not sure whether the U.S. in Trump can manage Netanyahu.
Look, there's one single point which I cannot emphasize it enough. The U.S. only has enough reserve crude oil left until about middle July. And Trump has said that himself. And if they can't get the crude oil moving, it'll be a huge, huge domestic problem for them and across the world. I mean, many East Asian countries, Bangladesh and so on, they've run out of crude oil and the products of it. So it is necessary to manage Israel. Now, you're right that Netanyahu, Naftali Bennett, people like Ben Gvir, Smotrich, they all have said that they're not going to stop. They think it is their right to, as they call it, defend themselves. But there is a question of whether Washington can or will, more importantly, will constrain Israel. And there's a difference between, we all know that the United States possesses leverage, big leverage over Israel. But are they willing to use that leverage? Just to give you an example, they give Israel $4 billion a year of aid. And they've given them $175 billion since the start of that country. So, of course, they do have that leverage. And I suppose we will never know what is really being said behind the screens and behind the media and quietly around the table. And I hope it moves in the right direction. That's all that I can really say. It's very unpredictable at the moment.
Well, you mentioned domestic politics, and we know that the midterms are looming, and so Trump also really has to worry about what's happening within the United States. Will he gamble with that? Because, as you said, the fuel reserves are very minimal at the moment. He's got to appease the citizens of the U.S., and at the moment, they don't have an appetite for this war. Will he continue to appease Netanyahu? I honestly can't see that he can. I mean, he is a gambler, we all know that, and he's very unpredictable, but he's run out of cards basically to play. He's got no other cards to play than to separate himself basically from Israel, and I think that's the only thing that he can do. And he needs to threaten or do it, actually cut some of the aid to make Israel think twice about what they're doing as well. And you mentioned what he's been saying and what J.D. Vance has been saying, and it's pretty amazing. I think it's the first vice president and president that I've heard that's spoken this critically about Israel. So that to me is a good sign. Well, I do appreciate your time, Dr. Joan Swart, Defense and Strategy Analyst, also from the University of Stellenbosch. They're just giving us her take on that negotiation between Iran and the US.